the Ministry of Tourism of Nepal has a slogan, Nepal, once is not enough. And I completely fulfill the slogan of the Ministry of Tourism. And in this aspect, I think this is a good slogan, once is not enough. To have the full Nepali experience, you have to visit, to learn, to make the contacts, to build the friendship. So I'm here for the second time.
How you are enjoying this second tenure?
Nepal is a beautiful country. You have an amazing, friendly people, a culture which is extremely interesting. You have a lot of beautiful things in Nepal, and I think this is a very, very good experience for Nepalis, for foreigners, for everybody, to enjoy the good things. You have a lot of good things here in Nepal, and I'm still exploring. I have the opportunity to visit so many places, and of course I will continue. It's like asking me, do you like tomato or cucumber? Sometimes I like the terai, sometimes I like the hills, and sometimes I admire the mountains. You know, I have special places in Shivapuri that I like to sit and to look towards the Langtang. You look to the left, you see Ganesh.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Ganesh, but he's very friendly and very joyful. So this combination of Ganesh and Langtang, and then if you look on your right eye, you see the Gauri Shankar.
Yeah.
And you remember all the story of Ganesh and Kumar. This is a joyful place. Last time I was in a school in Kathmandu, but earlier last week I was in Janakpur.
Janakpur, yeah.
Again, I don't have to tell you, the atmosphere of holiness in Janakpur is in the streets, in the people, in their faces, in the temple. We had a lovely opportunity to visit a medical school and to meet the students. We had a cleaning activity around the temple. I had the opportunity to meet the guru there. I got the blessing. I visited Ganga Sagar. I had Aarti there. So of course, it's beautiful. Janakpur was amazing. The relations with Nepal are very important, I think, for Israel, also for Nepal, the relations. Relations were established as early as 1960.
Yeah.
And Israel will never forget that Nepal was the first one and the only one from this part of the world to establish relations with the State of Israel. This friendship will never be forgotten. So I think that during the last 60 years, the bilateral relations were amazing. It's going on again 60 lovely years. I'm sure that the next 60 years will be even better, and maybe even 600 years. So this is amazing bilateral relations that we can see between the two countries. BP Koirala was elected to be the first democratically elected Prime Minister in Nepal. I think it was 1959.
Yeah.
And he got a huge majority and a huge support.
Right.
And he was the Prime Minister. He was running the country. And of course, as a Prime Minister, you deal with all issues, with science, with agriculture, with security. So the moment that there is some trade, even if in security, it is done between the government of Israel and the government of Nepal.
Yeah.
Now, as a Prime Minister, I think this is part of his decisions, or the Minister of Defense, what to do, where to allocate, and I'm sure that his targets and reasons were of course legitimate. And I think that until today, his name is in the history of Nepal as the first democratically elected. His democratic values are really strong in the political system in this country. So I think he came here on the day of the Army Day.
Right.
And at the day of the Army Day, earlier we prepared it, a troop of Nepali paratroopers jumped from the aeroplanes for the first time here in Tundikel, in the center of Kathmandu. And everybody was joyful regarding this security cooperation. Yes, that was a historic. Difficult to say because visits is one aspect of bilateral relations.
Yeah.
And it's not true that there were no bilateral visits. And that is 1993 and 2017, 3 or 4 years ago, the foreign minister visited and the Minister of Agriculture visited. We have the visits. And not only the visits. I mean, the visits are important. But the issue is what is done in substance. Right. And I think that since 1960, the cooperation is very good on all levels. You mentioned the security. I will not elaborate more on security. Okay. It is still going on, and security cooperation will continue, of course. But there are other aspects of cooperation, whether it is agriculture, whether it is scholarship, whether it is caregivers, whether it is investments. So many aspects of cooperation that you can understand that things are going all the time between the two countries. So it's going on. I don't know if you're aware, but there are Israeli companies that are operating high-tech centers here in Nepal. It's here, with Nepali youth. When I say Nepali youth, I mean young people at their 20s and 30s that are developing software for Israeli companies. There are almost 10,000 Israelis visiting Nepal every year before COVID. And this is a major effect on certain areas of the country, because these Israelis don't come for a day or two, they come for a month or two. This is a major effect for things that are happening. We have sent 3,000 Nepalis on the Learn and Earn project to go and to practice agriculture in Israel. And it is a major effect on the Nepali agriculture and economy. We are sending this month 1,000 Nepalis to be caregivers in Israel. And they are really soon going to Israel. We have given scholarships, thousands of scholarships, not on this Learn and Earn, a different project for people at the middle of their lives in education, in health, in NGOs, gender issues, also agriculture. So these activities are still going, and I'm sure that they will continue. During the earthquake, Israel was the first one, and you will correct me, maybe the only one, that sent 4 planes, cargo planes, huge Hercules, with tons of medical equipment, with 200 doctors and medical team to open a field hospital with operations here in Chauni, in Kathmandu.
We covered the news,
A lot of aspects that are happening, and I'm sure that will continue to happen on different kind of cooperation, bilateral relations between the countries. I'm sure it will continue. Nepal is important, and this is a very good question. Many people tell me, what is it that there is such a link between Nepal and Israel? And by the way, it is right both directions. When you talk about with Nepalis, their friendship to Israel is amazing, and when you talk with Israelis, their dream is to come to Nepal. And why is it so? When Nepalis and Israelis talk together, in a minute you have the contacts between the two people. Why is it so? Nepal is a small country, and Israel is a small country. It's like a small goat that is standing next to big elephants. Now, the elephants are not negative, but sometimes, you know, elephant is an elephant that are a little bit happy and careless. Yes? So, in this aspect, the two goats feel a lot of sympathy one to the other, because we understand one another. We understand that we have challenges. We understand that as a small country, you always have to check that your interests are not affected. Now, Nepalis and Israelis are proud people, proud nations, proud because of your language, because of your culture, because of your religion, because of your hidden treasures, your natural treasures, because of your mountains, because of the hills, because of Terai, because of what you are. You are proud to be Nepalis and you don't want to be anything else. And this is the same about Israel. We are Israelis, and this is what we are. We are surrounded by a big civilization around us, and we are small. But still, we want to continue to be what we are. Israel is a small country. It's the size of one of the provinces of Nepal. One province is the size of Israel. So when you are so small, you have to look to people that are the same like you. And this is the reason why Nepalis and Israelis feel such a close attachment. The first issue we discussed is the bilateral. And when you talk about relations between two countries, they have two legs. One is the bilateral relation, and the second one is the multilateral. Now, there are two separate legs and two separate directions, streams. Okay? The bilateral is what we mentioned, and the multilateral is something that we don't see. And this is the reason why people are not aware of what is happening on the multilateral. The multilateral means what is happening in international organizations, mainly in United Nations. And United Nations is in New York, sometimes also the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and maybe other United Nations organizations or international organizations. Now, this is not known. People don't know what is happening in these organizations. Normally, the policy of Nepal is neutral. Nepal is a small country. You don't have global interests. You're not a major international power. You're a small country. And this neutrality is true regarding different conflicts, different international issues, except one issue. And when it comes to the votes on the Middle East, on Israel, Nepal does not support Israel, and Nepal even is not neutral. We see that all these votes in United Nations, Nepal is voting against Israel. There is one vote actually that Nepal recently in the last 3 or 4 years is not voting. In United Nations, Nepal is voting against Israel. And we think that this is the time. Good bilateral relations will also have an effect on the multilateral relations. We believe that the Nepali neutrality on different sectors or issues or conflicts in the world will also apply to the neutrality regarding the Middle East. And we raise this issue, and I really hope, I'm looking forward, that there will be a change for neutrality in Nepal's pattern of voting in United Nations, and it will improve. When you talk to leaders, when you talk to Nepalis, there is always a sympathy. There is always appreciation. There is always good relations with Israel. And by the way, this is not political. This party and this party and this party and this party, this is not political. The sympathy that we have towards Nepalis and Nepalis towards Israel is non-political. We bring this issue, and I'm looking forward. I'm yet to see the change. We did not see the changes yet. And I hope that there will be a change. We respect the Nepali position. And let me tell you that the formula was set more than 20 years ago of coming to a dialogue and to a solution in the Middle East. This is clearly not the issue. The issue of multilateral is when there is a vote on different issues, whether Nepal will take sides with one of the parties. I'm not talking about the solution of 2 states or whatever. I'm talking about practical issues, all major issues that are concerned about the Middle East, about the relations between Israel and Palestinians, with our Lebanese neighbors, with our Syrian neighbors. And by the way, many countries that are, like Nepal, supporting the peace process, find a way to be, some of them even stand next to Israel, and some of them to keep their neutrality. And I really hope that in the future, Nepal will be able to move forward towards Israel. Let me remind you that last week, the head of the Palestinian Authority, visited Israel, was hosted by our Minister of Defense to discuss further developments and further progress. Yes, we have some things that we don't agree, but the cooperation is going on. It's not that there is no dialogue between us and the Palestinians. And the fact that Nepal is encouraging it, it's very, very much appreciated by Israel. The question is not what is happening between us and our neighbors. The question is the votes, and this is a completely different issue. Years ago, the Palestinian Authority was established. The head of the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Abbas, is running big areas under him. Some of the areas were taken by an Islamic organization called Hamas. Now, this organization, a radical Islamic organization, does not recognize Israel and not recognize the right of Israel to be, to exist. And this is very, very difficult. On the one hand, we have a dialogue with the Palestinian Authority, and on the other hand, big parts of it are controlled by an Islamic organization. Let me tell you, when a conflict, there is a conflict, a territorial conflict, a political conflict, you can come to a solution. You say 10, I say 0, you go down to 9, I'll go to 1, you'll go to 8, and we'll find the compromise somewhere between 4 to 5 to 6 to 7, and we find a solution. When the conflict becomes a religious conflict, it is very difficult to find a solution. Because you or they have their own belief, we have our own belief, we can all pray to God, but not always you get the full answers. So how do you compromise? You can't compromise on your religious beliefs, on your values, on your ideology. You can't. And this is the reason why we should not turn this conflict into a religious conflict. Religious conflicts are, I don't know if you can solve them. Political conflicts are possible to come to a solution. So this is the danger of this organization, this radical Islamic organization of Hamas. And unfortunately, it is pushing the Palestinian Authority to the extreme, because when somebody is standing next to Abbas and telling him, Abu Mazen, and telling him, listen, we are more extreme, he is very reluctant. He cannot compromise because the hardliners are standing next to him. So I think we should leave religion to where it belongs, to the individuals, to the praying places, and let the politicians run the politics. Human rights is an important value. Israel is a democracy, and it was a democracy since its establishment, which means that we hold votes, we hold elections. But sometimes when you have security issues, you have to protect yourself and to limit the freedom that we would like to give. And of course, that security is a major issue. But let me tell you on human rights, at the moment in Israel, we have a coalition of 8 parties. One of them is a Jewish religious party, and the second one is an Islamist religious party. So the Islamists are part of the Israeli government at the moment. So they are sitting inside, they are taking whatever is possible, they are progressing their issues, and I think this is a major breakthrough to see that even Muslims, not radicals, can sit inside and help us to build something better. Because when Israel is flourishing, and as you know, Israel is 20% Muslim. They are being progressed as well. Israeli-Arab relations are changing and are improving. Israel today, 2022, is not what it used to be decades ago. We have an embassy in Jordan, we have an embassy in Cairo, we have an embassy in Morocco, we have an embassy in the Gulf, an embassy in Dubai, an embassy in Bahrain. We have dialogue with other countries like the Sudanese, sometimes even with the Saudis. We have dialogue in the Middle East. The relations were formalized in the last 2 years, and this is a great progress and a great achievement, and I think it is good for the Emirates and Israel, but also all the other countries. We have good dialogue. I just mentioned how many embassies we have there, and dialogue. So these things are happening, and they will continue to happen, and it will improve the situation in the Middle East. However, there is another element, not in the center of the Middle East, but in the Middle East, and this is Iran, which is playing a radical negative factor in the Middle East. A country that calls for the elimination of Israel is a country you can't have a dialogue with them. And this country is developing nuclear weapons. And the world thinks, okay, this is a problem of the Middle East. It is not. This spread of nuclear power to a country which is radical, that can use it for religious reasons, is dangerous to the world. It will affect. And if Nepal thinks that it will not affect, it will affect, because these circles of instability will reach all over the world, not only in the Middle East. So this is the time that the world will say to the Iranians, to Tehran, to the regime there, you go and respect human rights. Right. You go give equality to people with other religions. You go and give equality to women. You give equality to minorities, to people with different ideas and preferences. And this is not happening, unfortunately. I hope more and more countries are going to understand that Iran is a threat. It's a threat to the world. I think that at the moment Nepal should focus inside. You must continue your development. You must continue the changes. I was here 10 years ago. I see a lot of good changes. The country, the society is a country in a transition, in a social change constantly. And these things improve. I think that this is very, very crucial and very, very important, that you will continue the development. The development, how should I say, the democracy here is strong and vibrant. I know that people are always, it's not only in Nepal, believe me, it's also in Israel. We talk about our leadership and politics. It's in every democracy. And we are all proud, Nepalis and Israelis, that we can freely talk and say what we believe. And the changes happen in both countries. And this is one aspect that is very, very important here in Nepal. But also the economy. The economy in Nepal is moving forward. Yes, you have a lot of more challenges you have to solve to change the progress. But when I look at Nepal in the last 10 years, in terms of health, that has improved a lot, in terms of education, that is changing, in terms of production. I remember 10 years ago that we had 15 hours of electric shortages. Listen, it's almost, I can't say forgotten, but it's not relevant anymore. Yeah. Yeah. So these things are amazing. I think that during this year, hopefully, Nepal will start exporting energy. If I would say it 10 years ago, people will look at you as if you fell from the moon. And this will happen this year, and if not in 22, 23, for sure it will happen. Things are changing here. And all these changes, of course, are dramatic on everything that is happening in Nepal.